This series of pictures portray reminiscences and photos of Flying Officer Max Collett's service with the RNZAF from April 1942 to May 1945 during World War II. My father, Captain Harry Collett. Dad served as a lieutenant in the Boer War and was a captain in the 1914-18 war. He was badly wounded in the Battle of Passchendaele. My brother, Sergeant Bill Collett. Bill was killed while converting from Wellingtons to Lancasters. Bill served a tour on Wellingtons, and while converting to Lancasters, a photo flash flare blew up in the aircraft and all were killed. There was some mention of sabotage, but this was never proved. My brother, Flight Lieutenant Chum Collett. Chum was a Foundation member of 489 New Zealand Squadron as a navigator and flew on Handley Page Hamdens and later on Beaufighters. He survived the war and returned to New Zealand. A photo of myself taken after the war. I was a flying officer when demobbed. Myself as a trainee at Initial Training Wing at Rotorua. The white flash in the cap signifies aircrew. This photo taken in Canada after I had finished my training and graduated as a sergeant pilot. While in Canada, I trained on Harvards and Yales. Myself taken in Merville in France in 1945. Note the moustache. My Caterpillar Club membership card. These cards were issued to all who saved their lives using an Irvine parachute. I was shot down dive-bombing bridges on the River Rhine in Germany. My certificate confirming the award of a mention in dispatches. Flying a Harvard while training in Canada. A flight of Miles Masters. These were training planes between the Harvard and the Spitfire. We flew these when we first arrived in England. The crest of my squadron, 485 New Zealand Squadron. The New Zealand Spitfire Squadron. The motto is Ka Whaiwhai Tonu, which means we fight to the end. 485 was an RAF squadron manned by New Zealand pilots. A photo of myself taken in Merville, France in 1945. The Spitfire is a Mark 9B with two 20mm cannons and 2.5 machine guns. This plane was numbered OUD, and I named it Waipawa Special after my hometown in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. One of our commanding officers, Squadron Leader Johnny Niven. Johnny led the squadron during the D-Day landings and on into France. Johnny was the only non-New Zealand pilot on the squadron. Squadron Leader John Patterson, DSO, DFC, French Croix de Guerre. John took over the command of the squadron after Johnny Niven and took us through Europe to Germany. He now lives in Havelock North. Some early members of the squadron. Group Captain Hawkeye Wells is fifth from the left standing. Hawkeye was one of the most successful of the New Zealand Spitfire pilots. Three of the early squadron members taken at Kenley. Wing Commander Reg Baker, Wing Commander Reg Grant, Flight Lieutenant Mick Shand. Another photo of some of the early members of the squadron. Flight Lieutenant L.S.M. White, known as Chalky. Chalky was a well-known member of the squadron. He was shot down in France and escaped unaided back to England. He travelled through occupied and unoccupied France, over the mountains to Spain and home via Gibraltar. Some of the members of the wing to which 485 Squadron was attached. El Dia is on the right. A general view of some of the pilots in full flying gear. El Dia being presented his DFC by the King. El was one of the highest decorated New Zealand pilots. A photo of the armourers of the squadron taken at Hornchurch in England. The majority of the ground crew came from the UK, but there were a few New Zealanders with them. The armourers rearming Russ Clark's plane. Russ Clark, Eddie Atkins and I shared the same tent for many months whilst in Europe. A photo of some of the ground crew taken at RAF Station Selseyville in south of England, just prior to D-Day. Another photo of pilots taken at RAF Funtington, south of England. Our CO Johnny Nevin is in the centre of the photograph. The whole squadron taken at RAF Selseyville, South England, just prior to D-Day. I'm on the extreme right, standing. Taken at Clanbedda in North Wales, where the squadron was training as dive bombers. 485 was one of the first Spitfire squadrons to be used as a dive bomber. 485 squadron went to England to convert onto Tempests, and this is a photo of the squadron in front of the Tempest. Due to heavy losses in Europe, there was not enough Tempests for us, and we went back onto Spitfires Mark 14. Eddie Atkins and Ethel Downer, showing how we lived during operations in Europe. It was normally 3 officers to a tent. A group photo taken at RAF Funtington, South England. I was not in the photo as I was in hospital with a broken ankle. 2 days before D-Day I had flown up to see a friend of mine at Newchurch, landed the Spitfire, jumped out, put my foot in a hole and broke my ankle. Just my luck. Just a photo of Spitfires on the airfield at Merville in France. A rather staged photo of the armourers loading a 500-pound bomb under the belly of the aircraft. A photo of a Mark 9 Spitfire. Taken at B-53 Merville, France. We were taking off to dive bomb the docks at Calais. Note the 500-pound bomb under the aircraft. Taken on the way to dive bomb Calais. I was flying number 4 and took the photo through the bomb site. Again note the 500-pound bomb underneath. My OUD Y-Power Special after a landing accident in Germany. The person behind me crashed into me while landing. I was not seriously hurt, but had a few days in the Army First Aid Post. Note the propeller mark behind and in front of the cockpit, just missing my head. While I was being transported unconscious to the hospital, the dispatch rider escorting us was killed by means of a piano wire stretched across the road between 2 trees. This was a common practice used by the Hitler Youth gangs at the time. After this, the use of dispatch riders was discontinued and replaced by jeeps with angle iron in the front. Photos of the Bailey bridges over the River Rhine in Germany. Pontoons were anchored in the river and the bridge built over them. Suzanne Goodwin, whose parents ran a small coffee shop on the outskirts of the aerodrome at B-53 Merville in France. My 21st birthday party started out from this cafe. My wife Noeline and I met Suzanne many years later in England. A photo of the buzz bomb sites in the Calais area, France. We spent many hours dive bombing these, but without a lot of success, as the launching ramps were just concrete with a railway track on them and were very hard to destroy by bombing. Another view of the buzz bomb sites being inspected by 485 pilots after the sites were captured by the Canadian Army. The official German history of Operation Bodenplatte. This operation was a last-ditch operation by the Germans to turn the Allies back from Germany. On New Year's Day 1945, every Allied aerodrome in Europe was attacked and strafed simultaneously as the attempted army broke out in the Ardennes. The operation was a success as far as aircraft destroyed was concerned, but a complete disaster for the German Air Force. We lost over 150 planes on the ground, but they lost over 200 aircraft and pilots. They never really recovered. B-65 Moldegem, Belgium. Our first view of the aerodrome from our billets in town. We were due for an operation that morning, but was cancelled due to bad weather. Otherwise we would have been in the air when the 6 Me-109s attacked, which would have been very interesting. We lost 13 aircraft. Burning aircraft on the airfield as a result of the attack by the 109s. Another view of burning Spitfires. And another view. All that's left of my WWII Power Special. Another view showing the very belated attempt by the fire crew. Destroyed Spitfires on the ground. Me and my WWII Power Special. My armourer, Rick Norman, with his OUD. A cartoon drawn by a member of the ground staff commemorating the event. A series of photographs of Germans leaving Moldegem in Belgium after the town was liberated by the Canadian Army. German prisoners of war after the liberation of Moldegem. Our tent at B-105 Dropa, Germany, showing our living conditions. Note the New Zealand flag on the flagpole. Taken outside our tent in B-105 Dropa, Germany, the day the war ended. First World War cemeteries in France. I took these to send to my father, who served there in 1914-1918. A captured Me-109 taken at B-152 Fasberg, Germany. We quite often used this, transferring ourselves from the billets to the mess by sitting on the wings. My last flight, a Tiger Moth at Waipakarau Airfield, 1946. To complete this series of photos, it is worth noting that the Squadron still has a keen membership and meets at reunions each year. This photo is of a reunion held at Napier in 2005. Sir Tim Wallace, our patron, is seated 6th from left.